Morning, everyone. We're just letting a few more people drop in, and then we'll get started in a moment. So bear with us. Hey, Dinu, nice to see a familiar face, and a few others.
Good morning, Dinu.
Awesome. Okay.
Has everyone got their coffees?
Yeah, hopefully. Awesome. All right. Let's get started. I'm sure. Morning, Claire. A few more people drop in as we go along as well. So if you haven't met me before, my name is James Ness. I lead the consultancy team at FinCrime. I'm also delighted to have Alex with me. And I'm sure Alex can, if you haven't met Alex, I'm sure she'll give you a quick elevator pitch as well now.
Hi, everyone. Yes, I'm Alex. I work with fintechs and I help them build out their compliance and financial crime functions. And James and I work closely together and using FinTrail expertise.
Awesome. So I guess just to set the scene. So last year, me and Alex did a really good. Well, we called it a hiring roundtable. I think that's what we called it, right, Alex?
Yeah, I think so.
And it was pretty well received. We had some good people from we had like Marta join us from Clearbank, and she was great, and a few others from the industry to kind of give a few useful insights and discussion topics on hiring. And me and Alex thought this year, why don't we make it a bit more of a regular kind of thing? So we're planning on doing this quarterly. It's going to be super informal. So we've got a loose kind of schedule that we're going to go through on a few different topics, but ultimately we want to know what you want to know as well. So if there's anything specific and questions, just throw them out there. There is a questions tab, or feel free to put them in the chat as well. We'll monitor them as we go along. So it's meant to be as useful as possible for you. So we've got a few different things we're going to cover, but ultimately anything you want to chat about or go about, we've got a few scheduled bits we're going to talk about for the first 15-20 minutes, and then questions at the end. But throw anything at us as we go along. If we can answer it, we will. But ultimately, there's lots of things to navigate from a FinCrime perspective at the moment. So the idea of these sessions will be to kind of see what trends we're seeing in the market, and also anything that we think might be kind of relevant going forward in the future as well. So anything else to add, Alex? What have I missed?
Yeah, I think it'll be interesting if anyone else does see, some other trends that are happening, drop it in the messages as well, because we're going to try and collate all the information. So if you are seeing anything, that would be great to know from your side, to anyone listening. But also we thought it'd be useful to see, because once you start noticing these trends, and how they collate together, both from regulation and then what's spiking hiring, as a candidate, you can notice this pattern and go and upskill yourself in those areas, because it's going to be in quite hot demand. And also for hiring managers, you can plan your hiring based on that. So you're kind of hiring or signing off on roles ahead of time, which means that when it comes to crunch time and everyone's doing the same thing, there won't be a shortage of candidates. So you're kind of just planning ahead, and sort of marrying these two together will be useful to everyone. That's all.
Just to check, can everyone hear us? Just to make sure, I just want to. Can someone say at least yes in the? Oh, we've got thumbs up, which is good.
I love that function.
Vivek, I don't know if it's potentially on your side, but seemingly everyone else can hear us. So just try and work it out yourself by the sound of things. So any problems, let us know and we'll try and help. All right. So the first topic that me and Alex thought we'd have a quick chat about, keeping something, I was going to say reasonably neutral, but it was more on the topic of MLROs or heads of FinCrimes and things like that. And the reason that we've kind of identified this one as it's always important to talk about hiring, and it's always a tricky one to navigate. But for those of you in the UK, but still also really relevant to anyone outside of the UK as well, the FCA, who are the supervisory authority in the UK, they this year they posted a basically a competency and capability piece in January, which was related to their senior management regime. So their SMF 17 and I think the other one's 18. Dinu, you'll keep, no, 16 and 17. Dinu, I'm sure you'll keep me saying on that one. So this is to do with their heads of compliances and their basically their MLRO functions. And the idea of this particular piece was just to basically explain in terms of skills. I've got a nice thumbs up from great. It basically relates to kind of what skills and experience and training they expect kind of the MLROs who are going through applications or who are already kind of working for authorized firms under their supervision, and what kind of skills they actually expect them to need. And actually, it's quite interesting. And I will post, and we as FinTrail did a bit of a additional kind of guidance piece on it, which I'll post both momentarily as well. But ultimately, they split it into kind of three categories. And I think it's really useful for you to have a look at if you're A, going through an authorization, B, have imposter syndrome and you're worried about your own kind of capabilities fulfilling one of those duties, or finally, just like if you're hiring as a hiring manager and you're creating a job description for an MLRO, or you're creating like a job description for a head of compliance or even a head of FinCrime, whatever capacity you're looking at. It's worth having a kind of a review of this, because it basically splits it into training, experience, and also support from third parties, and actually capacity as well. So and one of the interesting things that I actually kind of picked out of it is they don't necessarily. Everyone always assumes that you need someone that has already been authorized with the FCA before as one of those senior management regimes. But actually, they specifically say it's about proportionality, and providing the individual has the relevant experience, clearly they can fulfill the role. So don't be put off from that perspective. I'll post it in a minute. But I guess, Alex, I know you always are hiring for these types of roles. What are you seeing at the moment? Is there lots of these roles out there still? Are people struggling to fulfill these roles? You give us the download from your perspective.
In January, the main thing that I saw, I had, I think in 1 week, 9 separate fintechs or upcoming fintechs, whether they were CEOs or COOs, who have heard that they need a license. So they say, right, we need to get one of those MLROs or heads of compliance, but not necessarily knowing the cost associated with that. So they were coming out to market with getting an MLRO for like 80K or 90K or something like that. And on that document that you guys did with FinTrail, where you very clearly outlined everything on there in so much detail, I thought was super useful. But there was nothing in that document to suggest that this type of person would be cheap. Like, everything in there shows that you need a lot of experience, to be honest. You may not need to have had the title, but you need to know where to look, what to do. You need to have all of those things. And it was pretty, you guys had a long list of things of what you might need for that. So I think the main thing has been the expectation of what the CEOs and COOs want, and not really paying the right salaries for it. So that's one of the biggest things. And those are roles that I didn't take on because I can't go to market with something like that when I know candidates might not necessarily be interested. So that was definitely what I saw first thing in January.
Awesome. So salary expectations, meeting the right experience, I guess, is the main thing. One of the main things to think about. Obviously, you're hiring a mid-level, more senior person, right, Alex? So ultimately, you've got, I guess people can reach out to you, but you have a benchmarking piece that you've put together. Well, no, you used to. I think you still got one that people want it, they can drop you a message.
I did one for 2022, which I'm going to post probably next week. If anyone wants it, drop me a message. I have done a new salary benchmark. And the other thing I noticed was the fintechs that have come up kind of in the last like 1, 2, 3 years. So the really, really young baby ones. they're the ones that haven't had the chance to understand the cost of compliance, right? Whereas the more, I don't know, the ones that have been around 4 or 5 years, they I don't know, probably had like a slap on the wrist or something by the FCA or whatever it is. And they were like, oh crap, okay, no, we do need someone to come in and fix the situation. So naturally salaries have gone up for that. But yeah, it's all reflected in the market salary guide. I'll share it with you as well.
Awesome. And it would be wrong of me not to talk about the dreaded word crypto. So I guess the reason I want to ask you a question on this, Alex, is one of my perceptions of the market at the moment is that the amount of crypto roles from a compliance and FinCrime perspective are potentially driving are really absorbing a lot of the talent pool. So I guess what's your thoughts on that? Because that's where potentially we're seeing there's loads of people suddenly deciding that actually me as an MLRO or senior management or whatever role, your crypto doesn't sit outside of my risk appetite now as it becomes a lot more regulated and widely accepted. And there seems to be loads of roles out there, and I know lots of people that are kind of making that jump into that space rather than staying in traditional financing.
I think crypto is exciting. It definitely is. I will never just say like, oh, don't touch crypto because it's scary or whatever. No, definitely go into it and get the exposure. But actually, I wanted to ask you a question first. You know the deadline with the FCA thing to do the license, is that March 5th? That's coming up like now, right? Have you
Which one
seen
for the crypto
yeah,
authorized for money laundering?
I think so, yeah, because I've seen a couple of fintechs recently where I've been getting emails saying that they won't be able to operate in London anymore and they're going to move somewhere else, like Lithuania. And these are fintechs who have been trying to get some type of license for like the past 2 years, and some of them haven't succeeded at all. So with crypto, what I'm really hoping the new firms can start doing is actually take a lesson from this, look at why they haven't been able to succeed, and what happened there, and then invest in your compliance to make sure that you get, I don't know, the license stuff over the line, or to make sure you have everything in place so you have a really robust function when you do start operating. But crypto is massive. It's anyone who's looking to hire in crypto, they tend to look at payments experience as like the closest one in terms of, I don't know, being able to do the job. But the attitude towards it is kind of like how people felt about joining a fintech 5 years ago, right? They're a bit hesitant. It's like, oh, we don't know which way this is going to go. We don't know what's going to happen. But more and more people are starting to get comfortable with it, if I'm honest.
Yeah.
What are you seeing there? Like, what do you think in crypto? Like, what are the main regulatory challenges that you think crypto firms are going to experience?
Got it.
Because that's going to impact hiring.
Yeah, I think you might be talking about the temporary permissions regime. Potentially, that might be the one, which isn't necessarily purely related to crypto. But I guess what we're seeing is, an increased need of resource in the crypto space specifically, in a retained basis, or ultimately in more senior kind of roles. I think they are reasonably fresh to the market when it comes to navigating the regulatory landscape in a lot of countries. So I think the need for support and from a hiring perspective is becoming increasingly important. So yeah, I guess from a hiring perspective, really, we're like seeing loads of people kind of move over to that direction. I always find it really interesting because I follow whatever jobs are coming up on LinkedIn. I see so many crypto roles that have been there for ages, and like they're reposting them, and it's really interesting.
Is it a specific type of skill set that you're seeing?
I don't know whether it's with specifically to the firms. I think some obviously want actually request like blockchain experience and stuff. So which not everyone can fulfill, and obviously not everyone has knowledge at. And this is they're looking for a very unique person there, which probably doesn't necessarily exist, because you want a traditional kind of compliance person or FinCrime person that's done all the framework building and understands the regulations, but then you're also asking for someone that understands kind of crypto risk and blockchain risk, which actually do not necessarily marry itself with a relatively new kind of payment vehicle, because that experience just doesn't exist out there. So I think maybe, I mean, my opinion is that the reason some of they may be finding it difficult to kind of fulfill these roles is because the experience, what they're looking for, just doesn't exist. They just need to, you know, it's like, how many boxes can you tick? You don't have to necessarily tick all of those from an experience perspective.
It's managing the expectations. So then what would you say is kind of like the closest transferable thing, like using your knowledge of blockchain or crypto? Like, what would you say, okay, someone from that sector could perhaps transfer a lot easier?
Interesting.
An off the cuff question, by the way, guys.
I think anyone, right? Like, I think
Yeah.
a financial crime framework, if you ultimately is transferable. If you've implemented, like, if you've implemented an onboarding process, if you've implemented the principles of transaction monitoring, are still ultimately the same in blockchain. It's just a slightly different methodology. So, and you still need to monitor the fiat in and out of blockchain anyway. So, I actually think. It's just making sure you've got the right. I think if I was hiring for a crypto firm, I actually would assume that the individual that's moving in there could learn the kind of crypto aspects. I think it's just another payment vehicle rather than, you know, the actual experience of actually financial crime risk and implementing a framework. I think I would personally look for that experience rather than just purely blockchain. But that's just my off the cuff opinion.
Maybe you guys should do a crypto course.
Maybe we should
and do that. So when you see the small crypto firms, how do you feel about the fintechs that are probably no longer fintechs? So, you know, the companies that are maturing, they're getting bigger, they've got like over 400 people. Like, what trends are you seeing in that area?
Yeah, well, I think this is an interesting one, and it probably leads us on a little bit to the future trends as well, because I am conscious of time, because as usual, Alex, we've gone off piece, but we will overrun, won't we? I think maturity is a really interesting one when you look at it from a hiring perspective as well, because I think if you think about how the fintech kind of is quite a broad brush kind of area and stuff, covers so many things, but a lot of the companies that we classified as fintechs are not actually fintechs now. They're either mid-sized banks, they're large payment firms, they are you know, large investment firms, or whatever they are. So I think what we're seeing now is a maturity from a hiring perspective. So you know, ensuring like really clear kind of three lines defense models, making sure that you've got a clear onboarding team, and that reflects in the hiring perspective. A head of financial crime that manages the first line of defense, and a proper, like, you know, second line the defense as well, that monitors the oversight of the function as well. So I think from a hiring,
I'm nodding.
You're nodding.
I'm nodding because
you're seeing this as well. So like, and there's a gap between, isn't there? There's that maturity bit that goes in between. So people either, you know, hire a head of fraud, or hire a head of FinCrime, or hire an MLRO that does everything with a small team. But then obviously think a maturity perspective, and for the fintech market is hugely maturing. So I think that's definitely kind of where I'm seeing like that more three lines of defense, and as these fintechs, which the banks have obviously always had for years and years and years.
That is exactly what I was going to say. I feel as these fintechs or large payment institutions now grow, they are kind of replicating the model of the traditional banks. And what I mean by that is they're going into these siloed functions, right? You're going to have your head of FinCrime Ops, like you mentioned, the fraud, a sanctions team, a TM team, a KYC team. These teams did not exist in fintech 2 years ago, really. They were all FinCrime analysts and then MLROs.
Yeah,
that's literally how it was. And now we're starting to see it become so much more established, as like you said, they build out the three lines of defense. My only, not issue, but I think the struggle at the moment is because these fintechs are now in a position to hire these new heads of roles and these teams, again, these candidates don't really exist right now because they're kind of the first ones to do it in fintech. So naturally, they're going to have to take these candidates from the corporate world. And then you have that clash again of salary, You're trying to move people from the corporate industry that do have higher salaries into the fintech world. And it's kind of like starting again. This problem on salary is still happening now with MLROs, but now as they create these siloed functions, it's managing those expectations that you're not going to have a head of transaction monitoring for a fintech unless they come from one of the big banks, because there's very few out there. I'm not saying they don't exist, because I know a few, but it's not a massive pool of people.
Definitely.
So,
I actually think that cross-pollination, as I'll call it, of fintechs and banks is like ultimately what the success story should be for an operating model. Like I think a blend of experience is also like extremely vital, and also the talent pool is like is like just doesn't exist. So like making sure like you're looking at hiring from different backgrounds to meet. Just because someone hasn't worked in a fintech, just because someone hasn't worked in a bank, right? It's all cross transferable. We've got some good questions actually to cover in a five minutes. But what about the future? The future. What does that mean then, Alex? What do we think 2022 brings for like some of these hiring themes in the FinCrime world?
Okay, so the immediate future is sanctions related roles, and by the end of the year, data analytics, FinCrime data analytics, those are two things that I'm kind of seeing this year. And funnily enough, it's the candidates who are currently working in the kind of consultancy space that are really focused on the data analytics side of things. There's a lot going on there, and I think if you are a candidate in the market, and if you can find a course to kind of see what data analytics is all about, it will do you no harm. I genuinely think it'll be such a massive benefit. That's just a quick snapshot on that side. And then sanctions, obviously we don't need to mention everything that's going on in the world, but there has been a massive backlog on the sanctions front, and I think there's going to be a need for sanctions contractors in the next couple of months, and more hires and expansion of those functions is how I see it. What about you?
I mean, I'll just echo the sanctions point. I think sanctions with expertise. I don't necessarily think there's huge amounts of that out there. There's lots of fantastic generalists who touch the sanctions topic, but there's probably not as many kind of sanctions experts available in the market. So I definitely agree on that, and especially on the kind of the like talent pool from the interim perspective. Like there's probably going to be remediations on the sanctions perspective going on this year, like given there's going to be a lot of movement in kind of list management and making sure that you're covered in that perspective, and not everyone will be. So I think everyone's running around worrying about their risk, worrying about where their exposure is. So the need from that perspective, definitely agree on that perspective. I think another one, I mean, fraud continues to be a huge issue. So I guess those of you who, again, in the UK, but look, fraud is everywhere, right? So the UK government are developing a new fraud strategy or a new 10-year fraud strategy, I think, this year. So whatever that looks like, which they're obviously asking for feedback into. So I think, fraud experience continues to be a need, especially in those smaller businesses, Alex. Like I know when I moved from the gambling sector to the financial sector, the reason that I this was a few years back, the reason I kind of managed to get that job in the financial sector was in the small fintech was because of my fraud background. So I think not necessarily that is the only financial crime risk out there, but that seems to continue to be, an issue out there, and also what's on everyone's agenda as a small businesses, managing bottom line, managing operational volume risk as well. So, and then I think the last one that I think I've got on my list as well is effectiveness. So I think effectiveness with the regulators, but also, Wolfsberg have been banging the effectiveness drum for kind of a few years now. Is I think one theme that I think we'll see maybe going this year and next is, some of these fintechs and firms, building out their QA or QC functions, so their quality assurance and quality control functions. So more kind of roles kind of becoming apparent on there to make sure the frameworks are effective, But then also audit roles. I think as we talked about maturity, didn't we, Alex? That these smaller businesses are now larger kind of institutions, and actually they're no longer, sadly, using kind of FinTrail for their audits, kind of outsourced audit requirements, and they're likely to hire internal audit functions. So I think
so you see that as like the natural maturity of a fintech, right? Like those functions.
Yeah, because ultimately, you when you get to a certain kind of size and scale as a business, you rather than relying on a third party or relying on your FinCrime team to kind of cross-check their own work or their own homework or whatever the phrase is, I think bringing in like the assurance roles is going to become increasingly important. Partly because I think there's going to be a lot more regulatory scrutiny on effectiveness kind of going forward as well. Anything else? What have I missed? I mean, there's probably loads, but we do have questions. We've got a few, so we'll try and work our way through them. I think we'll stretch past the half an hour mark, I think, Alex, won't we? If anyone can kind of stay on. First question was just and apparently controversial, but I don't think too controversial. Is the high demand for junior mid FinCrime analyst roles for crypto firms overinflating salaries? What do you think on that one?
Yes and no. The reason I say that is because there are some crypto firms, which I will not name, who have been in a couple of issues and have needed people urgently, like really taking on lots of analysts or mid-level people to come in because they need to fix their problem. The only way to do that quickly is to offer ridiculous salaries. And I remember seeing this like back in 2018, I think, when like JP Morgan or something was hiring 1 year experienced KYC analyst for like £500 a day, right? Which was insane. So it's just putting a band-aid over a problem temporarily. However, whenever the salary is that high, or whether you're taking an increase of over like 20 grand or something, always ask why. Always be cautious of those things. And I say this a lot to MLROs. If you're on, I don't know, 110K and suddenly you're getting paid 170, why are they paying you that? Like, really don't get, I don't think it's some other crypto companies, though, they're paying okay salaries for junior firms. I think it just depends on what the compliance situation is at that particular firm. So do your due diligence and find out any news on them and see what's going on. Yeah.
Alex is sitting on the fence, but that's all right.
Yeah, sorry.
All right, next, quickly, I'll run through the last, and feel free to keep firing any last minute questions on there. Next one was hiring in the UK, hiring overseas residents. I think this is an interesting one, and hopefully everyone can generally see it. But ultimately, the talent pool in the UK is probably stronger than a lot of other for the FinCrime and fintech industry than maybe other kind of countries in the EU, mainly because outside of the EU, mainly because it's a more mature kind of sector compared to kind of other countries. But clearly, a lot of these UK fintechs have kind of branches outside of the UK as well, so that might be a better way to get in. I think is my short answer. Next question was actually on for entry-level positions, what type of roles companies would you suggest, i.e. red flags to avoid and green ones to go for? I mean, I don't know if we'll necessarily say any specific companies that have red or green flags, but I mean, I think turnover of compliance staff is always an interesting one to track. I mean, I always make sure do your funding background to know where the funding's coming from and how long it will last for. I don't know, Alex, do you have any other general red flags, green flags to look at?
For entry-level positions, if you're starting your career in compliance as entry-level, I would go to a consultancy. I really would, because in a short amount of time, let's say you're there for 2 years, you get so much exposure in lots of different things. Different sectors, different industries, different types of work within financial crime. And that can be very, very useful and it gives you a lot of awareness. The red flag for that, though, is don't get stuck doing KYC remediation for your entire life in a consultancy either, because then you're not really getting a lot of exposure. Yeah, that would be my advice.
And then the last question I think we've got here is just how do you manage salary expectations from someone moving from a bank to a fintech? I think the question is about pay cuts and things like that. Would you need to take one?
Taking a pay cut is obviously a very personal decision, but if it affects the happiness of your work, I think as long as you have a baseline of what you need on a day-to-day basis, and for some people that can be like, I don't know, 90K, 80K, which is a very, very good salary, like incredible salary. And if you can take a pay cut to, I don't know, maybe 75, but the benefits outweigh that, so you actually enjoy going into work or things like that, never take an extreme pay cut, because that will just stress you out financially, mentally, everything. So figure out a bandwidth of how far you're willing to go to enjoy your job as well. That's what I would say.
It's good advice. And I think ultimately, like, some of these larger businesses pay the same as banks now anyway. Like, don't expect to go to a 10 person bootstrap fintech and, get your salary that you're getting at Barclays or something. That's not going to happen. But obviously, if you do want to move from a traditional kind of bank to a fintech, whatever that means. But I think, some of the larger firms are very much paying equivalent salaries there now anyway.
Yeah, I'll post out the salary benchmark, because they have gone up, definitely.
Right. Awesome. Any other questions before we wrap up? I mean, hopefully, like, we kept it very casual, hopefully useful, interesting. We're going to try and do another one in another 3 months' time. So if there's anything like anyone want, quick last question, are there any fully remote jobs? I mean, remote from another EU country? Not Paul, not 100% sure I understand your question, but feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn and we can have a follow-up conversation on that if you need any advice on it.
I'm yet to come across any company offering fully remote.
Yeah. Oh, okay. Remote from other EU countries. Yes. So
Yeah.
I think I understand now. Yeah. I think some are, like, I think there is elements of flexibility. So I think I don't know if any companies come to mind that I can mention, but I think some companies are offering fully remote, like some of the fintechs. That is flexibility is always something that they try and kind of fly the flag of. So Pina says she is fully remote and she's living in Estonia.
That's amazing.
And believe, I think that answers almost two questions actually that we had. That answers Paul's one there, but also potentially answers one we had earlier from I can't remember, but yeah. So thanks.
I have seen companies do almost like a secondment where they just say, okay, for 3 to 6 months of the year, you can go and live somewhere else if you want to. That's flexibility in itself. I tend to say, depending how big the fintech is, small fintechs need people in the office because they kind of need to grow that culture and that community aspect of things. But I think the bigger ones are a lot more flexible because they're quite in tune with what their company culture is. I don't know, that's something I've noticed.
Yeah, definitely.
And look, Claire said, finance.
And Dinu is furiously typing, so I feel.
And Dinu.
Type quicker, Dinu. We're all waiting in anticipation.
And Dinu said earlier, the combination of corporate and fintech experience, 100%. The candidates, the main difference I see, if you work in the corporate industry, that's great, but it's actually the attitude is, are you actually passionate? Can you get your hands dirty? You're not just someone who delegates. So there's definitely candidates in the corporate world who are such a massive asset to the fintech world.
Yeah.
Totally.
All right.
This was useful to some people.
Well, hopefully, I found it useful and interesting. If not, it's a good conversation that me and Alex have with people watching it. So that's good. Thanks, Claire. Well, we're going to try and do it again. Hopefully, you can all join. I think you'll get the recordings and stuff. Any topics you'd like covering next time, just drop us a message, and we'll cover it. So just reach out to me and Alex, and if there's any areas you want to cover, we'll incorporate it for next time, but we'll try and do another one in 3 months, 2-3 months time. So keep an eye out for it.
Amazing.
Awesome. Thanks, everyone. Chat soon. Replay is available online, apparently. Yeah, everyone. See you.
Bye.